what I would call the revenge-o-matic. This is a very unknown 70s Western called Cry For Me, Billy. It's an unknown 70s Western for the most part, except for true aficionados. But it shouldn't be, because it is a true classic 70s cynical, paranoid, violent Western with a little bit of hippie trappings in it that works pretty well as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to read the back of the box.
1972, right?
1972. It stars Cliff Potts, Sochil, and Harry Dean Stanton. And we'll talk about him later, but I actually think the first, even though he's done a lot of stuff, I think the first official, real, truly Harry Dean Stanton performance. It's a media home video. A nomadic gunfighter, Billy, rides into a small town and tries to help a tribe of runaway Indians. His concern for their welfare puts him at odds with the U.S. cavalry guarding the tribe, and is quickly marked as a troublemaker. When the Indians are massacred trying to escape, only a beautiful young woman survives and takes refuge in the wilderness. Billy's attempts to help the girl are resisted at first, but a love affair quickly develops between the two. Their idyllic life is shattered, though, when the cavalry troopers catch up with them, violate the girl, and drive her to suicide. Left alone, Billy obsessively plans his bloodbath mission of vengeance. Harry Dean Stanton, from Paris, Texas, and pretty in pink, plays a hired gunfighter who befriends the renegade Billy. Approximately 93 minutes. Remember, don't forget, this is a movie. Okay, so same thing on the box. Same thing on the...
Rather say Harry Dean Stanton is from Red Dawn. Like, avenge me! Avenge me!
And it would be in the Western section under the seas. Look, I had seen this movie earlier this year. I'd heard about it for a long time, and I was always a fan of the actor, a light fan of the actor Cliff Potts. He was sort of a Robert Redford-ish wannabe Steve McQueen kind of character, and he had his time for a while.
You mentioned he was in Silent Running, playing one of the guys.
Yeah, he's probably the main guy of the other astronauts in Silent Running. He's in this. He's one of the lumberjacks in Sometimes a Great Notion. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of the film. I first noticed him because I was a big fan of the film The Ground Star Conspiracy, mm-hmm. and he's in that. But then he would pop up in stuff all along the way. His coolest credit is in the mid 70s, like 73, 74. He starred in a TV movie sequel to Nevada Smith, where he played Nevada Smith. And in it was like, so he's playing Nevada Smith and Lauren Green is playing the Brian Keith character.
So it's like a full self-contained, it's like a TV movie.
Yeah, it was actually it was a TV movie that I think they hoped would become a series.
Like a backdoor pilot.
A backdoor pilot. But it was a big TV movie. Not only that, it also got, I'm trying to remember who the director was, but it's like Gordon Douglas, so like a big Western director, had never done a TV movie before. A big Western director like Gordon Douglas actually came and directed it. And also John Michael Hayes, I believe, who's the guy who wrote the original screenplay for the Carpetbaggers mm-hmm. and Nevada Smith, because they're all connected. Also wrote the script for this Nevada Smith sequel. Now, I've been trying to track this TV movie down, and I've never been able to find it. But there's one part about it that I remember very, very well. I remember liking it, and I remember him doing a pretty good job in it. But there's one part that I remember very, very well, because it is a little direct sequel to Nevada Smith. Because if you've seen Nevada Smith, Steve McQueen fights all the guys that he ends up fighting. Martin Landau at the beginning, then ends up with Carl Malden. And the whole setup for the film is he wants this vengeance on these guys, and then Brian Keith teaches them how to get the vengeance. So at the beginning of the TV movie, Lauren Green is playing the Brian Keith character, and him and Nevada Smith bump into each other. And so like they have this nice little scene where so what happened? What happened with those guys you were after? And I'd never seen that in a sequel. So like a movie that's all about like, I'm going to kill these 5 guys. And then he bumps into a guy a couple years later and taught him how to do it. Hey, so what happened with that? And he answers it. I've remembered it since I was a kid. I saw it like in 73. And he has a really great line because the most memorable scene in Nevada Smith is the knife fight between Martin Landau and Steve McQueen. And he goes, yeah, well, okay, yeah, so I got them all. I got them. I just remember. You made me practice with a gun until I couldn't hold a gun anymore. And what happens? The first guy comes after me with a knife. Which I thought was a really great way for them to like deal with the first movie. Anyway, but I've been a fan of Cliff Potts for a long time, and he still shows up and stuff. And the thing about it is, it's easy to mistake this movie possibly as a lower budget film than it is. It's not a studio movie, but it's involved. A lot of big people are involved in it. Not only is there Jordan Cronenweth is the cinematographer, Elliot Kastner is maybe he gets the credit for producer, but he definitely gets the credit for presents. But that suggests that it's like a backdoor studio movie. Heath character and him and Nevada Smith bump into each other. And so like they have this nice little scene where they, so what happened? What happened with those guys you were after? And I've never seen that in a sequel. So like a movie that's all about like, I'm going to kill these 5 guys. And then he bumps into a guy a couple years later and taught him how to do it. Hey, so what happened with that? And he answers it. I've remembered it since I was a kid. I saw it like in 73. And he has a really great line because the most memorable scene in Nevada Smith is the knife fight between Martin Landau and Steve McQueen. And he goes, yeah, well, okay, yeah, so I got him all. I got him. I just remember. You made me practice with a gun until I couldn't hold a gun anymore. And what happens? The first guy comes after me with a knife. And when she actually gets to call him by name. Yeah. Billy. But like they don't need language.
And she plays almost the entire film, frankly, naked.
Naked, or at least a blanket over her, yeah. But she's quite good in the movie. I really liked her a lot.
She's incredible in
the film. She's terrific in the film. And they have a good chemistry. It was such a good chemistry that they ended up getting married after the movie was over, Cliff Potts and this lady.
And she became Maria Potts.
Mm-hmm, yeah. You know, so it has this friends, hippie, idyllic, if just the world would let them alone, then their love
could blossom.
Could blossom. But that's not what happens. The army soldiers that were looking for her before find them, beat the shit out of him, tie him up, rape her, then leave. She unties him, and then she commits suicide. And so now he's out to go and get revenge on these guys. And then that happens in a way that when I first saw the movie seemed more gratifying than it did the second time around. But then it has a really terrific tag at the end that I'm not even going to describe it because I don't want to set it up. I don't want to ruin it. But there's a powerful tag at the end that just makes it a cynical, fucked up 70s Western. Which makes this movie as much a product of its time as The Loved One was a product of its time.
For sure.
I mean, in every way, shape, or form.
For sure.
Everything leading up to it, but the end especially.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I still really like the movie. When I've been trying to watch stuff like this, I haven't liked them that much on the second go around, or at least I have problems with them. But I didn't really have problems with that much with Cry for Me, Billy, except for maybe one thing in the big revenge part. It's just a movie nobody knows about, and it's just such a era of 70s filmmaking and 70s Westerns that I thought I really wanted to introduce it to both you. More importantly, I wanted to introduce it to you, then also to our audience, which is secondary as far as I'm concerned. Well, introducing it to you is the most important part. The audience get what they get.
I had never seen it, and boy, was I happy to see it. Maybe happy is not the right word because the movie's pretty tough. Mm-hmm. In fact, let me just read this old review from Franklin Browner.
No, I didn't know that Franklin Browner chimed in on Cry for Me, Billy.
He back in 72, he penned this interview. There is more than just physical nakedness in Maria Xochitl Potts' fully exposed performance in Cry for Me, Billy. The raw, emotional smoting her Apache character must endure multiple times throughout the film is soul-crushing. When Cliff Potts' quick-draw saddle tramp becomes her unlikely and only protector, he is labeled an Indian lover and gets to learn the gun-butt's end of intolerance firsthand from a grossly unshaven posse of grimy characters, and possibly makes it worse for her by about 8 times, which is enough to warrant her character's ultimate self-determination. It is worth noting that the difference between a vigilante and a posse is that vigilante is a person who considers it their own responsibility to uphold the law and who does so summarily and without legal jurisdiction, while a posse is a group of people summoned to help law enforcement. This reviewer feels these men are neither. They're just scum. Cry for Me, Billy, 1972.
That was pretty good.
You introduced me to 70s Westerns, basically. You gave me the appreciation for it. You were the one who sat me down and like showed me important unknown Westerns. Like, I don't know, Monty Hellman's The Shooting and Ride in the Whirlwind.
Yeah.
And when we watched those movies initially, we talked mostly about the screenplay by Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, from Ride in the Whirlwind, for sure.
Ride in the Whirlwind. I mean, I to this moment, I can still hear us laughing about man gets hung.
Man gets hung.
Yeah, man gets hung. The vernacular of that film is captured so authentically, at least it feels as though it's captured so authentically, that when people say man gets hung, like, you feel like, okay, that's real. That's how people really would have talked. And this movie had that.
Yeah, well, this movie actually, I think, has it even a little better than Ride in the Whirlwind, even though I think Ride in the Whirlwind might even be more authentic in that regards, because people were just very unverbal at that time. However, all the movies that we watch that have a very Westerns that have a very strong vernacular going on, where, the people are actually kind of verbose, but they're not the verbosity of people with a college education. They're the verbosity of another time period. Yeah. And even their sentence construction seems different, but there's still something creative about it. Well, all of that comes based at the end of the day, all of that comes from the book True Grit. Yeah. That's all them. Right. Yeah. That's all them taking the dialogue from the novel of True Grit, which was a complete new way of how Western characters could talk, that both told you who they were, but it wasn't a college professor writer putting words in their mouth. Completely. And probably without True Grit, you probably don't get, I don't know, Cormac McCarthy and Blood Meridian. You don't get, you do not get Cormac McCarthy without True Grit. And it really comes across when that old prospector comes by, and lends him the shovel. And the dialogue up until that has been fantastic. I mean, one of the things that's so great about the film is this opening and closing section with Harry Dean Stanton. You don't even realize what him and Harry Dean Stanton are talking about at least half the time in that opening 20 minutes. You don't need to. But they know what they're talking about. And it just sounds so fucking authentic. Yeah. And it's also what's great about it is it's the emergence of Harry Dean Stanton as the great actor that he will be, because he has been in other things before. But he finds himself in this movie. And from this movie on, he will be Harry Dean Stanton. You know, when it first began, we have a bunch of Apaches kind of rounded up. They're sitting around. They're not being given water. They're sitting in the sun. They're clearly suffering. Everybody else in the town is just kind of going about their business and doing their thing. And and by the way, we have returning from our great demonoid, we have Roy Cameron Jensen, the man who reminds Roger of his father. My dad was there. Of his mining father, playing the blacksmith, who will end up having quite a bit to do in the movie by the time that it's all finished. Yeah. Well, here he's got his boot on a bunch of Apaches that they've got rounded up. Yeah, he's going to break one of their head open with a sledgehammer. Yeah, and Cliff Potts, shows pity to them. When it began and he started, I'm going to give them the water. At first I was like, okay, come on. My bullshit meter is going off. Who's going to do that in the Old West? And I know that it's there so that we know in our hearts that this is like the good white guy. Yeah. But when it first happened, I was like, come on, this is a conceit. Yeah. But it's also there when he doesn't win over the girl immediately, but he's able to say to her, hey, remember me with the water? Yeah. yeah. So it's her. And I wasn't even expecting her. I didn't think she was even a component of the movie. But, once the two of them are together and we see their relationship forming, and also that we just see this actress, Maria Sochel Potts, nakedly running through the film, just bearing everything, and not just naked physically, literally naked emotionally. I would make it a point even stronger from where you're coming from, remembering how you watched it. You didn't just start plugging into her once their idyllic thing started happening. Correct. You plugged into her when you saw what this actress was being required to do and how she pulled it off with a complete aplomb. A brave actress, someone who is giving 100%. I mean,
Look, we know movies are not easy to make. We make it look easy, but, you know, at the end of the day,
this was obviously a brutal production.
This is a brutal production to make. When you have an actress who is naked and running barefoot through the winter chaparral, falling and wrestling,
I'm sure this film was difficult on everybody. It was difficult on the crew. It was difficult on Potts. It was difficult on everybody. I'm sure
it's emotionally difficult for the director. You know, because what you're effectively saying in the film, you know, is about, you know, both the worst and the best of people. But it means that you've got to go to the worst of people to do it.
We're back and we're joined by the lovely Gala.
Unknown is an understatement, Quentin, when speaking about this movie. This movie is not available on Amazon. It's not available on iTunes. It's not available for streaming anywhere.
It's not even available on YouTube.
It's not. At one point, there was an account that had it available on YouTube, which no longer exists.
Cliff Potts shut that down.
It's not available on DVD. It is only available on VHS.
Right on, baby.
That's right. And by the way, and that VHS is beautiful, by the way.
The way you walk is just the way I walk. The way I talk is just the way I talk.
Okay, Babalu.
Maybe even more importantly, this movie is actually not available on torrent websites. A friend of mine checked on their very reliable Russian torrent website, where everything exists. This movie does not exist.
Everything used to
internet.
exist. Those servers are a little under pressure at the moment.
Well, this movie is only available on VHS is what I'm getting at. Except the Germans pulled through for me. I found a German dub on YouTube of this movie.
So you watched it in German?
I watched it in German with AI-generated subtitles.
Oh, wow. So you actually had subtitles going on?
Dieser Mann ist unter Arrest.
Well, they're very bad subtitles, so I had no idea what was going on. But this movie on YouTube in German has 1.8 million views.
Oh, really? No kidding.
It has a huge following in Germany, which I kind of went into. But the German name for this movie is Gebrannte Haut, which means bleached skin.
Gebrannte Haut.
Which I thought was interesting. Anyway, I had no idea what was going on in the movie. I really like that little Sparrow song, though, that's in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Oh, I did like that little. I liked the little Sparrow song.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked the Billy song at the end, too.
Yeah, I really liked it. But
again, that was part of the 70s-ness of it all.
Yep.
Because I watched a German version of it, I had to figure out why is there a big German following of the movie? And why is the film so hard to see here? So apparently the movie itself was supposed to go through Warner Brothers, which was at the time handling films made by George Barry's Brute Productions.
Oh yeah, we never talked about that. It's a Brute movie.
Oh right,
yeah. George Barry from Fabergé. All right, the coolest cologne that I know of in the 70s was Brute. All right,
yeah, and they actually have the Brute logo.
No, all the Brute films have that Brute logo on it.
It's great.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so a couple of other famous films on the Brute line is James Toback's Fingers is like I think the most famous one.
Yeah, Fingers.
But then also there's the black actor Raymond Jacques' directorial debut, the movie Book of Numbers, with him and Philip Michael Thomas and Frida Payne is a Brute movie as well. But so is this one.
So apparently the movie showed poorly during its initial testing and was immediately dropped. Warner Brothers ended up
too tough.
Yeah, I think it was too tough and too rough. But Warner Brothers ended up dropping all of the Brute movies. I think Magnetic Video made a deal with Brute for their library.
No, they did. This used to be available on Magnetic, and so was Fingers. So was all the Brute movies were available on Magnetic.
The Brute titles with Magnetic home video are considered collector's items. They don't pop up very often. They are very rare. But the movie was so violent that it didn't really go into TV syndication either. Yeah. It did play on the on-TV subscription service in the early 80s, so it may have had cable airings elsewhere, but it was a rare showing to be had.
But that was just, but on TV was very special for on TV. You know, it wasn't like if they had the package, then Z and HBO had it.
Selective Vision.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, the Brute Library went into limbo, and the movies went completely out of circulation. I think Turner Broadcasting bought the library, so oddly enough, the movies are actually back at Warner Brothers now, where they first started out. But Cry For Me Billy has never been made available on DVD or Blu-ray, unlike some of the other Brute videos, and it's not available to stream anywhere. So
I think Fingers is the one that actually got the most play. All right, from the Brute library, but it does also suggest that somebody still actually has the rights to Cry for Me, Billy. The fact that this exists, and the fact that somebody hasn't been able to put it on YouTube suggests that there's still somebody who owns the rights to Cry for Me, Billy.
And they're protecting it.
They are protecting it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the German following, probably just dumb luck. It most likely had a supportive distributor in Germany and a supportive release, which is why the film has more German fans and why people in the comments love this movie.
Germans like Westerns also.
Germans, and also because it's a darker movie, it deals with more difficult themes, I would say. And
also Germans have a particularly, because they have their own troubled history. They especially like it when other countries show a movie that shows their troubled history.
It's more of a window to them than a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the early 2000s, it was actually not widely known that Social's real name was Maria Potts. She actually took the stage name to divert attention away from anyone in the business, knowing that she and Cliff Potts were getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to be able to seek out parts on her own, but they ended up getting divorced only a few years after making the movie.
It means flower in Aztec. Social.
But
what was your take on the movie? Even though you were
honestly,
because frankly, this is a movie that does not need much dialogue.
It doesn't. It was kind of like a visual novel. Honestly, I watched it. I enjoyed the music. The German was actually semi-pleasing to my ears, so I didn't have a terrible time watching it. I'm really happy though, because I managed to get a VHS tape of it online for $20.
Oh, you got this one online?
I got the exact same one online for $20. Wow. I'm really excited to actually rewatch it. But you're right. There's not that much dialogue, but a lot was lost on me while watching it in the wrong language.
Well, it's funny. There's not a lot of dialogue, but as we made a point, the dialogue that is there is actually really good and really authentic and actually adds a lot to the film.
Yeah, but it's a visual novel. It was beautiful, but a lot was lost on me not being able to hear what was going on and know what was going on. So I'm excited to rewatch it.
Well, that'll be definitely one of the ones that when you do watch it, we want you to come back and
for sure.
I started thinking about this movie and that it was like 1972. And I don't normally, for some reason, think of Westerns in the 70s. I hadn't thought of them so much. But really, Westerns were being made up into the 80s and 90s. I mean, still Westerns.
Well, the 70s Western is a genre unto itself. And it's not, and it's separate from the spaghetti Westerns.
And I looked up like what other Westerns were made in 1972. I was kind of curious about it.
They're almost all bummers.
They're almost all bummers. You got Jeremiah Johnson. With Robert Redford, Sidney Pollack, John Huston and John Milius with Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, Burt Lancaster in Ulzana's Raid,
which
Robert
might
Aldrich.
just be my favorite Western of the 70s, actually, Ulzana's Raid.
Really?
Yeah.
The Revengers with William Holden and Ernest Borgnine, Pancho Villa with Telly Savalas, that counts.
Yeah, any
Chado's Land, Charles Bronson.
All the movies that came out in the 70s that are Westerns for the most part, if it's starring one of the true 70s stars or is meant to be a current movie, then they're all anti-Westerns. All right. Yeah. Where they're looking at John Just I at what had been promoted heroically before.
It's revisionist Western.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, Jesse James isn't Tyrone Power, all right? In Jesse James, he's Robert Duvall's talking in tongues maniac killer, all right? Jesse James in the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid. Billy the Kid isn't Johnny Mac Brown or Paul Newman's brooding method turn in The Left-Handed Gun. It's Michael J. Pollard and Dirty Little Billy.
Right, I was just going to ask you about Dirty Little Billy.
Or it's Chris Christopherson, who plays a Billy who kills with all the callousness of a serial killer.
Sure.
In Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. When you look at the movie Doc, all right, Frank Perry's Doc, with Stacy Keach as Doc Holliday and Harris Yulin as Wyatt Earp. All right. Well, in that, the gunfight at OK Corral isn't so much a gunfight, is just that Wyatt Earp just massacres the Clantons.
Yeah.
Just kills them like a fascist cop. Just massacres them, and the reasons for power and money. So that's where they were all kind of coming from if they were a true 70s movies. Now, at the same time, you still had Andy McLaughlin and Burt Kennedy, all right, making all the movies with all the old timers like Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne.
John Wayne and the Cowboys. That same year. Just
knocking off those films, all right, for their dwindling audience that still wanted to see old-fashioned Westerns. In fact, the only guys doing straight Westerns in the 70s that were still fairly young was James Gardner and George Peppard. But everybody else, if they're doing a Western, it's an anti-Western.
It's a cynical Western.
It's a cynical Western, yeah.
Yeah, also just interesting that Rage and Cry for Me, Billy are the same year, both revenge films.
I mean, these are Vietnam years that we're living through at that time. And there's a lot of
pain and angst.
Pain, angst, anxiety, a lot of reflection on who we are as a country and what we're going through. And the movies are clearly showing that.
Well, I will tell you, man, Cry for Me, Billy and Rage was a pretty great double feature.
Yeah.
That's a really impactful double feature.
Yeah, also Cry for Me, Billy just makes me wonder how many other amazing movies are out there that have just been completely kind of forgotten and a little bit lost, because Cry for Me, Billy, honestly, it only has, I think, at this point in time, 23 logged views on Letterboxd with no way to watch it. And it makes me a little sad because what I saw of it, I really liked.
I will say that there are a few things out there, but not a whole lot like Cry for Me, Billy, where it's not a low-budget exploitation movie. It's still a low-budget film, but it was made with studio.
Made for a price. It was made for a price.
But it was made for studio resources, all right, by top people, and you just can't find it anymore. I don't think that there's that many examples quite like Cry for Me, Billy. That there's not a few different reviews floating around for it.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone should go get the VHS tape while they still can.
Yes.
Cry for Me, Billy would also be good with Posse, which we watched.
It would be very good with Posse.
It's another good one.
Mm-hmm.
Cry for Me, Billy with Co-Hit The Loved One plays December 26th